So I thought I would just give a very short perspective. As you know, I'm at the Center for Study of Science, Technology, and Policy. We are a think tank with a mission to enrich policy making with innovative approaches using science and technology for a sustainable, secure, and inclusive society. So you see in our mission statement, we already have the notion of sustainability. And we work across a diverse set of areas from climate, environment, energy and power, looking at how AI can be used for development, and also looking at various computational tools that will help some of these aspects. And you will see how I bring this up in what I'm going to say. So on the first thing, let us just start with the idea that I'm sure all of you are very familiar with the fact that we have a history of overconsumption. I think I don't know if any of you have looked through this. There's something called the Global Footprint Network, where they're looking at advancing science and sustainability. And what you see is that the amount of ecological footprint that human beings have on our planet is quite significant. And I guess in 1970, it was the 30th of December was when we consumed all what the earth has to offer. And it has been downhill since. And that's a very, very sad tale for us. If you want to know this year's, it is July 29th. So we are still in the ecological sustainable month. But then the question is, where is this red stuff coming from? And it's very clear that we are borrowing it from the future. We are taking it away from our children, our grandchildren, and others. So I think that is something that we really need to think about very clearly. And I would strongly encourage everyone to pay attention to this, see how are we doing as a collective when it comes to some of this. So this is just to set it up in terms of what it means. And as you'll see that, so this is where I would like to plug some of the work that we have done at CSTEP as a think tank, where we start thinking about, where are we going from here? What is it that we'd like to do? And we call our work Sustainable Alternative Futures for Sustainable Alternative, Futures for India. And, the acronym, it spells out to the word Safari. So let's get on this journey. Just a quick thanks to the CSTEP team that has been working on this for the past couple of years now. Ramya, Purnima, Kaveri, and Shweta. As you know, our SDG goals, our SDG goals, they have targets on health, nutrition, housing, energy. However, who's looking at the issue of sustainable consumption or sustainable futures, and how are we making sure that we're not over-consuming in achieving some of those goals? And in many cases, setting the OECD-like consumption goals brings about resource constraints and does not necessarily mean a better quality of life for all our people. Instead, we need to focus on the issue of sufficiency and not just a needs-based approach. And that's a really important aspect here. So let me just go forward now and give you two examples our work has done. There's a lot of work that has gone on, but I'll just give you two examples that will help set the context of what I'm trying to talk about. The first one is looking at the issue of urban form, where we can look at the situation where we have an urban form that could be a sprawl, which is private, or a sprawl that could be public, that's on, and at the same time, we can also look at situations where we have a more compact cities, a more compact living areas with better public transportation available, right? So these are the very simple choices that have been put in place. So the business as usual is where we go in the sprawl fashion, and then we have these alternate combinations where we look at different ways. So what does it mean when we go from a sprawl to something more compact? So what it really means is, one, alternate materials will be used for building, which could have a net GHG energy and land conversion could be much lower because of that. right? So that is something where you can look at new building materials, and as a result, the BAU energy intensive materials also increase space, and they also have more cooling requirements, which is something that we'll have to worry about going into the future. So when we look at the autoclaved aerated concrete, this is something that can be used for buildings, for more compact structures, but then also reduce the amount of cooling that will be required in our houses. And so that could be something that could be much better from a low cooling space demand. At the same time, when we look at transport needs in the future, a compact urban form with transit-oriented development will lead to higher levels of green open spaces, alternate materials, and even public transport interventions, which leads to an overall urban emissions could reduce anywhere by 30% from the current situation that we are undergoing today. So that is some thing that we should really think about. There are these co-benefits from health, right? Which is we could have lower pollution, we could have a higher green space in the process, and our transport emissions are currently our highest in the private transportation categories, and that would reduce and improve local air quality and health in the process. So in some sense, you will see from these urban form scenarios, and we look at the compact form with transit-oriented development, overall, we could see a reduction in residential land consumption by almost 85%. Particulate emissions could reduce 3 times. Our embodied emissions could be anywhere lowered by 12%. Total space cooling again could reduce by 40%, and could be 40% of the total, and potentially 9 to 10% reduction in cumulative GHG economy-wide emissions. A lot of this is available in a paper that my colleagues have written, and I would urge many of you to look at that. So there are a lot of scenarios that we have looked through, but in summary, this is the essence of this idea of changing our urban form, right? From a more sprawl-oriented to a more compact situation. Another example I'll just throw out there in the final few minutes is one on the issue of food and agriculture. All of us consume food. This is something that we cannot get around. And one of the things that the team explored was this idea of, one is different forms of agriculture. That is, can you change from the regular, what is called consumption as usual, or you know, the exploitation as usual, right? Groundwater and things like that, to micro irrigation, reducing, fertilizer-based consumption of sugarcane cultivation. And then if we look at, add to this, the idea of changing our diets, right? Half of our rice in our diets, let's say, is replaced by coarse cereals by 2050. And this could lead to almost 115 billion cubic meters of water savings per year. And as a result, also leads to 25 million tons of carbon dioxide savings per year due to rise in methane emissions. So there are multiple benefits to actually changing. So here we're talking about changing not only the agricultural practice, but also our consumption when we change our diets. So finally, the model and the system looks at various kinds of economy-wide emissions, looking at how can we reduce these emissions. There's a lot of conversation around how do we decarbonize our economy, how do we go to net zero. That's something a lot of people are talking about. And here we show that there are various interventions that need to happen. As you will see, in buildings is a big part of the emissions, and also looking at transportation. These are two big elements that would, is what I talked about today, that could make a significant dent in our reductions and could make a big change, and is a function of our behavior and the way we behave in society. So in summary, all I would like to say is that we need to examine our sustainable development goals, but also look at it from the perspective of decent quality of life for all citizens. If we don't do that, we are not going to have the right conversations with the people that we want to engage. We need to look at it from a perspective of resource constraints. Do we have enough water? Do we have enough land? Do we have enough resource, energy resource to do what we want to do? And we need to do that in an integrated and holistic manner. we need to also examine the trade-offs and sensitivities to particular solutions and make sure that they're practical in the process. If we don't do that, we will not come up with solutions that are practical. And so a plug again here, Safari, our tool is a first attempt, and we'll be putting this out fairly soon. So I would urge you guys to follow us. And it should be available to play with. You can look at what are the various changes that you can make and see what it would impact for India. And this is all for India going forward. And finally, all I would like to say is that we need to look at alternate materials. We need to look at compact urban form, change our diets, and this could lead to a more sustainable future. So it works both ways. It's from the business side as well as from the consumer side. Both have to work towards this particular sustainable future. So thank you very much again.